Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello, dear friends. Welcome here to this new year, 2022. Happy New Year for all of us. I hope you have been having a fantastic New Year so far. You've had a very special and lovely New Year's Eve and are enjoying this Saturday. And I'm so glad to be here with you all on this first day of the year, first day of 2022, for us to talk a little more about Spiritism, about the teachings that Jesus brought to us, and the topic that we have here, we have now for us to study a little bit more, to think about a little bit more, is a very good topic: courage. And what I want us to think, what I brought here for us, I brought some teachings from two different books. The first book that I would like us to read and to think a little bit about how courage is according to these teachings is the book Jesus in the Home. This is a book by the Spirit Neo Lúcio, channeled by Francisco Cândido Xavier. This is one of the books that I love the most because it brings many stories, a total of 50 stories from Jesus, from some talks that Jesus used to have at the house of Simon Peter with him, his family, and his disciples. So we get to know a little more about how was this time that Jesus spent closely with the disciples and these teachings that he brought to them. But we do not see many of those teachings in the Bible, because in the Gospels, because if you think about it, at the time it was more difficult for them to write and to pass on all the teachings, all the knowledge, and all the stories that they have. So this this book, psychographed by Francisco Cândido Xavier, is a beautiful one because it makes us feel like we are there at Simon Peter's house. And later, after we read and meditate a little bit about this story that I brought, I'm going also to use the Gospel according to Spiritism for us to see a little more about how courage is in how the high elevated spirits that help Kardec with the codification, what are the teachings, what the teachings are that they brought to us, and we can find them. I will bring two of those teachings. But first, let's see Jesus in the Home. But before talking about the book Jesus in the Home and about this lesson, let's just think a little bit about the word courage and how we use the courage in our life. Because many times when we think about courage, it's very common for us to think about that person that is very brave. For example, someone who has courage is that person that will face any. Usually, we connect courage with danger and with dangerous situations that we have in our life. For example, let's suppose that there's a fire, and we'll think about, oh, that person who has the courage is the one who is going to rescue the ones there, like firefighters, and or someone who can face a difficult, very tough situation. We think about the superheroes. If you go to the comics books, we see many superheroes, and we see all of them. We would say they are courageous persons. They have this courage. They are brave. And so that's the courage that usually we think. So we think that for us to have courage, we need to face difficult situations or situations that may put us into danger, into risk, and we just go ahead and face it without thinking twice. And as we are going to see, it's not exactly like that, because many times, of course, one of the points that we see that, for example, the Spirit's book, that our life is precious. We know that. So why, in some occasions, we would put our life in danger, in risk, without thinking twice, without thinking a little bit about the situation where we are. And that's not only the only examples that we have when we think courage. When you go to the root of the word courage, It is connected to core, uh, that in Latin means heart. So let's think a little bit about courage with heart. And when we think about heart, we think about love. So let's try to make a change in this view that we have about courage and think about courage as love, something that brings love to our lives. And for us to have courage, for us to be courageous, we need to have this love in our life, in our hearts, within ourselves. And when we think about love, we think about God, because God is the fountain of love in our lives. God is the one who brings love to all of us. So there is no way for us to think about courage without thinking about love. And we know that Jesus, as he used to say, Jesus and God, they are one, meaning that Jesus lived here on earth as an example of how to live following God's laws and following God's love. So if we think about love, courage, and God, we must think about love, courage, and Jesus. So that's why by reading this lesson from the book Jesus in the Home, we're going to see how we can use the courage in our lives and why it is so important to have courage, especially now that we are starting a new year, we're starting a new cycle. So let's read a little bit this lesson. I'm going to read the lesson, and if we need to stop a little bit to talk a little bit about some items, we can do that. So the name of the lesson, it is lesson 27. It is called The Forgotten Gift. So let's start. Everyone had focused their attention on an interesting discussion about the gifts with which heaven blesses souls on earth, when the Lord commented patiently, "There once was a man who had been showered with the gift of merit. Consequently, he received permission from the higher realms to approach the angel who was the dispenser of the divine gifts abounding in the world. The fortunate man thus asked the heavenly minister for the blessing of youth." So, what we have here, we have someone who was given this gift, these blessings. He could ask anything he wanted to this heavenly minister. And the first item that he asked is youth. And I think one point that is important that we bring this lesson to our life today, this first day of the years, because usually we have the New Year's resolution. And the resolutions usually are items or gifts that say that we want for the year. So many of us, we may think, as this man, okay, this year I want the gift of youth. I do whatever I want, whatever it's needed for me to achieve youth. And that's not the only gift. We are going to see other gifts. So it's very important for us to connect ourselves to this man here. Let's put ourselves in this man's shoes. So if we were this man, if we would ask this gift of youth and all the others that follows that, and why would we ask that, and what would we do with those gifts? So the fortunate man does ask the heavenly minister for the blessing of youth. He was granted his request, but soon he realized that youth might entail strength and beauty, but it also entails spiritual inexperience and weakness. No longer interested in youth, he went back to the sublime bestower and asked him for wealth. So, what do we see here? Many things that we ask in our daily lives is not, they don't come exactly as we wish. Many times we only see one side of that. For example, in this example here, the man wanted to be strong, the man wanted to be beautiful, wanted to be handsome as a young person, but he didn't saw all the other sides of youth. Because if we compare, if I look at myself 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I was so much younger than I am now. I didn't have all the gray hair that I had now, but I also didn't have all the experience that I have now. So I would see Marcelo that is not the same Marcelo that I am today. So what does it mean? It means that I used to be a different person. I used to be a less evolved person. I'm not saying that I am highly evolved or really evolved now, and far from that. But year after year, we evolve. Year after year, we learn some lessons. We go a step further. So if I am willing to go back 10, 20, 30 years in my life, I would face some consequence in that, and that man didn't see that. So he very fastly he regrets that, and he asks for wealth. And wealth is something that many of us we ask in New Year's Eve for New Year's resolution. We always want to have the money that we need to do all the things that we want in our lives, because many times we think that having money would be enough for us to get rid of all the problems that we have. So let's see what happens to this man when he asks for wealth. He was granted riches and enjoyed great wealth for a long time. However, he finally realized that having a lot of money provoked malignant envy in many people. Having become tired of the toilsome task of protecting his assets, he sought out the angel and asked him for freedom. So in this case, he had the money, but he said he saw that many people started to envy him. What happens? Many people that we think they're friends, once we are in a different situation, in a different position, they start to envy, and then we start realizing that maybe that friendship wasn't as strong as we thought. Many times we can have people going against us. Many times we start acting differently because once we have money or a different social position. So that's very common. That's very common. That's why when we go to the gospel according to Spiritism, man, they say that wealth is also a task that many people they face in their lives when many of them they ask to be wealthy here, but they know that it's going to be hard. They know that it's going to be difficult. There are many different texts in the gospel according to Spiritism talking about that, because it's not that easy to face all the consequences that wealth brings to our lives, and also to be able to use the wealth in a good way, because many times we will only think about wasting that money or spending that money with ourselves instead of using it towards other with charitable projects or to help the ones around us as well. So it's very difficult, and that man faced that man felt them. So he asked the angel to give him freedom. And what happens? He thought he was truly free. Even so, he was confronted by cruel, unseen demons that pestered him all the time, filling his mind with troubles and temptation. Exhausted due to the constant inner conflict in which he was living, he went back to the heavenly giver and asked for power. So what we see here, he was a free man, but he couldn't handle all the demons, all the temptations that he was facing. So even if on the outside he would be free, on the inside he was still a slave of all those evils that he had, that all those dark side and shadows that we all have within us. So no matter if we are free enough on the outside, we're still attached to all different things that we bring with us in our existences. That's what he found out. So exhausted for that, he asked for power. He received this new gift and clothed himself in great authority. However, this new gift, however, he realized sooner than he had expected that authority generates hatred and rebelliousness in lazy and ignorant hearts. And tormented by the hidden daggers of indiscipline and discord, he went back to his benefactors and begged him for intelligence. So he said the dark side of power. So the same way that he saw Uh, he saw the dark side of wealth. He saw the dark side of power, because the same thing. Once we have authority and we don't know how to deal with that, we will attract enemies. We will attract many different feelings and many different people around us, and we won't be happy if we do not know how to handle that. So now he asks for intelligence. Nevertheless, as a man of knowledge and learning, he lost the rest of the peace that he once enjoyed. No, nevertheless, as a man of knowledge and learning, he lost the rest of the peace that he once enjoyed. He quickly understood that it was not possible for him to sow reality in keeping with his wishes. In order not to fall prey to the destructive action of those he had benefited, he was compelled to plant a seed of truth amongst the thousand flowers of fleeting fantasy, and rather than adapting to this situation, he went back to the angel, asking for him for marital bliss. So, what do we see here? We see that this man is trying hard, having this blessing that he has of having getting any gift that he can get. No matter what gift he asks, he doesn't know how to deal with that. He doesn't know how to be happy with those gifts that the Heavenly Father is giving to him. So now he asks for marital bliss. Satisfied with his new purpose, he found comfort in a wonderful home and created a gracious family. But one day, death appeared and robbed him of his wife. Anguished at being a widower, he sought out the minister of the Eternal One at state, and stating that once again he had made a mistake, he asked him for the gift of health. So what happens? He asked for a marital bliss. He was happily married, but once his wife discarnate, he doesn't know how to live here on earth without her, and he is sad again. He's unhappy again. Once again, he goes to the Heavenly Father, to the Heavenly Angel, and asks now for the gift of health. So now we see that it's not material, it's just physical health that he wants. And what happens? He received his gift. However, after a few years had passed, old age appeared and disfigured his body, deteriorating and wrinkling it without mercy. Tormented and unable to leave home, his angel friend came to him and, embracing him like a father, asked him what new gift he wanted from heaven. So we see he had the wealth, health. He was a healthy person, but he couldn't face how he looked like. So he couldn't go outside. He wasn't happy with that. So once again, he received what he asked, but he wasn't happy with that. So now the despondent man said that there wasn't one. So he thought, I already asked all the gifts that I could. There's nothing left. What more could he ask for? It was then that the glorious messenger explained that in his quest for happiness, he had forgotten about the greatest of all the gifts that can uphold a person in the world, the gift of courage. Courage produces enthusiasm and good spirits with which to carry out the work that is needed each and every day. So, what we see here, he asked many gifts, and he couldn't live with those gifts alone. Why? Because he didn't have the courage. Let's go back and see and just think a little bit about each situation if he had the courage. Because what he says here, that courage produces enthusiasm and good spirits with which to carry out the work that is needed each and every day. Let's just go back a little bit just for us to remind the gifts that he asked and the problems that he faced. So we have here, he asked for wealth, so he received the wealth, and he has many envy people around him, many enemies. So if he had the courage to overcome that, he wouldn't feel unhappy. He wouldn't see those people as an issue in his life. But if he had the courage, he would overcome that. I mean, he would see that as an opportunity to grow, and he would be able to face that and to grow with that experience. The next one was the freedom. So he got this freedom, but he still faced his internal enemies, like all his vices and all the temptations within him. If he had courage, he would be able to face, to see, okay, I have this uh, issues within me. I have these vices. I need to overcome that. What can I do for that? He asked for a power, and he realized that the authority generates hatred and rebelliousness in lazy and ignorant hearts. So he saw those ignorant hearts around him, lazy hearts. If he had courage, he would know how, not only how to face that, but how to motivate those lazy hearts as well. So he didn't have that, it lacked in his life. Then he asked for intelligence, but he could not use that in a good way. He asked for marital bliss. He asked for health. So he couldn't use any of the gifts that he had in a good way because he lacked courage. So, what do we learn here? Especially now that we have these New Year's resolutions, it is the time for us to, many of us, we set some goals for our new year for 2022. So, what do we see here? What Jesus is teaching us that we may ask what we want, we may have these goals, but if we do not have courage, we won't be able to not to achieve those goals, but to be truly happy and to truly enjoy all the gifts, all the blessings that we have in our lives. Many times we won't be able to face those blessings because we will be blind with many obstacles that we have in our own lives. So, what Jesus is saying here, that if we do not have the courage, we won't be able to enjoy the gifts. And God gives us many gifts, gives us many blessings in our daily lives. If we stop every day and night when we go to sleep, if we pray, if we meditate on all the blessings that we've been receiving, we would see how lucky we are to be here, to have this opportunity to be here on earth. And no matter what are the problems that we are facing, if we have the courage, we will be able to overcome those problems. So at this point, Jesus paused for a few minutes and then, smiling at the small group, he concluded: Youth is beautiful, wealth is pleasing, freedom is admirable, power is brilliant, intelligence is respectable, a blissful marriage is holy, physical health is blessed. But if people do not have courage with which to deal with the good and bad things in human life in order to learn how to stay on the pathway towards God, the temporary gifts of the transitory experience are of little use. And putting one of the children on his lap, he nodded toward the starry sky, as if to say that only in heaven will the lasting happiness of men and women find its true home. So, what is he saying? What can we think about this conclusion that right here where we are, planet Earth, a planet is still of trials and expiations, we are in a process of transition to a world of regeneration, but it doesn't mean that we will leave this regeneration like tomorrow. It's not tomorrow, it's not 2022, it's a process. And it doesn't mean that in a world of regeneration, we are going all of us should be happy all the time. We're not there yet. As he says here, as Neo Lucio points here, Jesus nodded toward the starry sky as if to say that only in heaven will the lasting happiness of men and women find its true home. So happiness, the happiness that we wish, the happiness that we will have one day is not here. We cannot find it here all the time. But having courage, we will be able to have these moments of happiness. We will be able to see all the issues that we have in our daily life with different eyes. So this is the lesson that I wanted to bring from this book, Jesus in the Home, because I think for us to start this new year, it's very important for us to think about that and to have courage in our life. This courage that Jesus is bringing here to us is exemplifying here to us. And also, I would also like to uh, complement these teachings with a message from the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism. It is on chapter 24. So let's see, so we can have another view about this topic. So chapter 24, the name of the chapter is Do Not Hide Your Lamp Under a Bushel. And I'm sorry, chapter 5 first. I'll bring this topic from chapter 5. And then we are going to chapter 24. But on chapter 5 is Blessed are the Afflicted. So it's lesson number 5. And let me just find it here. Actually, chapter 5, lesson number 18, Instructions from the Spirit's Good and Bad Suffering. So as we saw here, we saw in the previous one, the man was still suffering. No matter what were the gifts that he was receiving, he was still suffering. So let's see this Lacordaire, how he explains about this good and bad suffering and what's the role of courage in our daily sufferings. So Lacordaire, he says, when Christ said, Blessed are the afflicted, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, he was not referring to those who suffer in general, since all who are down here suffer, whether rich or poor. But alas, few suffer well. Few understand that it is the enduring of trials what alone can lead them to the kingdom of God. So, seeing the example of that the man was suffering as everyone else was suffering. All of us, we are suffering. But the man wasn't suffering well. And he says here, discouragement is a fault. God refuses to give you comfort when you lack courage. So that's what was lacking to that man, courage. He didn't have the courage. So he wasn't receiving that comfort. He wasn't feeling that happy as he could. Prayer is a support for the soul, but it's not enough. It must be based on a strong faith in the goodness of God. It has often been said to you that God will not place a heavy burden on feeble shoulders, yet the burden is proportionate to one's forces, just like the reward will be proportionate to one's resignation and courage. A reward will be greater than an affliction is painful. But such reward must be deserved, and that is why life is full of tribulations. So here we can compare this with that man, because the man was receiving many different gifts. He could have the rewards that he wanted, but he wasn't suffering. He was suffering, but he wasn't suffering well. And what we see when we talk about suffering well is that we can face the difficulties that we have, overcome that, or at least understand how we can grow with that. So for anything that we have in life, any difficulties that we are faced, we need to stop and think, what can I learn with that? And we need to have the courage to do that, because many times it's very uh, easy for us to just lament, to just blame this or that person for the sufferings that I have, blame God, and say I'm not a lucky person. And even that man, we could consider that man a lucky person because he could receive anything that he wanted, even though he wasn't happy, he was suffering because he wasn't having courage in his life. So, courage, as I said in the beginning, love, having this connection with love, with God, and loves God, knowing that everything that happens in our life has a purpose. We may not understand it now, but we need to have this faith that that's what we need to go through, and in a certain way we are going to learn with that experience. So that's why now I go to chapter 24, so we can see another side of this lesson. So on chapter 24 is Do not hide your lamp under your bush. And we have here one of the chapters, one of the topics is the courage of faith. So here I'm going to read here Kardec's explanation. To first, let's read Matthew and Luke so we know what Kardec is talking about. So Matthew 10:32-33 says, "So everyone who acknowledges me before men, I also will acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I also will deny before my Father who is in heaven." And you also have, "For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words, of him will the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes in his glory and the glory of the Father and of the holy angels." Luke chapter 9, verse 26. What Kardec says here: "The courage of showing one's opinion in public has always been held in esteem among humans, because there is merit in braving the dangers, the persecutions, the contradictions, and even the simple sarcasm, to which those who are not afraid to admit softly ideas that are not those of anyone else are almost always exposed. Here, as in everything, merit depends on the circumstances and the importance of the result. There is always weakness in backing away from the consequences of one's opinion and to deny it, but there are some cases where it is a great a cowardice, as fleeing during a combat. Jesus decries such cowardice, especially with regard of his doctrine, saying that if anyone is ashamed of his words, he will also be ashamed of them, that he will deny those who denied him, whereas those who will confess him before fellow beings will be considered by him before his parent in heaven. In other words, those who are afraid to confess themselves disciples of the truth are not worthy of being admitted into the kingdom of the truth. So Jesus is saying here about this courage of faith, because many times we do not have faith, or we may pretend we have faith, but we do not follow Jesus' words. And we need to have courage to put his words into practice. And that's what lacked in that man, and that's what many times lacks in our daily lives. We may learn, we may study, we may go to church, to a spirit center, we may read the gospel, the Bible, and any other book every day. But if we do not practice that, if we do not have the courage to follow Jesus' steps, Jesus' teachings, and to put into practice in our life, then we will not be having this faith that Jesus needs. And Jesus is asking us for, and we won't grow, and we will face situations as that man. And if you think about this new year, what am I doing in this new year? What are my resolutions? Maybe one of the resolutions is this one, to have this courage of faith. I mean, to be able to be a living example of Jesus' words, at least to try, because we know we are not in that level that we can actually follow all the teachings. We cannot live as Jesus lived here, because we're still far away of reaching that perfection, but we can try. And that's what we need the courage for. We need the courage to try to be today a better person. We need the courage to have those New Year's resolutions and to be able to follow that according to Jesus, seeing Jesus as a model and guide. As we learn from the spirits in the Spirit's book, they say that Jesus is our model here on earth. So for us to be able to search happiness, to try to have this happiness in our lives, we need to have this courage to follow Jesus' step. And courage because it's not easy, courage because, especially in the world where we live today, many people are going to judge us, many people are going to treat us differently. Many times we are not going to be comfortable in some situation, because it means changing those inner vices that we have, those inner enemies and those shadows that we have. We need to face them, we need to change that. So many times we are so comfortable in the situation that we are that we don't want to change. But you need to have this courage to face that and to change that. And what this courage, once again, is having this connection with God, feeling God's love, and know that having, following all these teachings, following all these lessons, at least trying to, each day we're going to be closer to God, each day we're going to be closer to this happiness that we are searching so hard, this happiness that we deserve so much. So we one day we're going to be there, but it depends on the steps that we are taking today, and it depends on having or not courage to face all the difficulties, all the issues that we have in our lives. So that's why I brought these two texts here for us, because I thought it would be very interesting for us and very a good opportunity for us in this new year, beginning of the year 2022, for us to reflect on that, to reflect on courage and how we can use this courage in our lives, and especially this courage that means having this love in our lives and being able to face these situations. It doesn't mean that we will not fear. It doesn't mean that we not be afraid of maybe not being strong enough to go ahead. But having this faith in God, we know that having this faith, having this connection with God, God will always be helping us. He is always helping us. We have our guardian angels, we have Jesus, we have so many good spirits around us. We know we're not alone. We know we have help. So we just need to have this courage, also courage to ask for help, to pray, as Kardec says here, to pray, to ask for help. It is also an act of courage. So having all this in our daily lives, all these tools that we have, we're going to be able to face any difficulties, we're going to be able to have a good year, to have a good year ahead of us. So let's think a little bit about that and try to use those teachings in our daily lives. Thank you so much for your company. Thank you for being here on this first day of the year. And may God bless all of us in 2022. We may all have happiness and have this courage in our daily lives. See you later. Bye bye.